the record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, you said that in the Telegram message to me. One door closed, another one opens, and I guess you've been using that most of your life, and I've been using it most of my life as well. But it is a bit thought-provoking, isn't it? Because you don't, neither you or I say it glibly. We say it because we believe it. Okay. So how does it work?
Well, I think there's a bit of it needs to be unpacked a bit, because in my mind, it's not a synchronized thing as such. Like, just because one door closes, the other door doesn't immediately open. It opens when the time is right. So. But there's no doubt about that, and I think in my mind, when I think about or reflect in the past, isn't that interesting? I've just been looking at the time that Skype says that we've been recording, and it says 9 minutes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Anyway, so it does come back to that broader issue about letting things unfold before you, doesn't it? And as one apparently dominant activity winds down or ceases, it clears a space for something else to emerge, doesn't it?
I don't know. You use words like clears the space. Okay, where's the space? Okay, or is it the fact that a door is closed on, I don't know, on some sort of space, or what sort of space, and yeah.
Well, I suppose I say that in the sense that a space, in my mind, sort of an activity occupies a space.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. But I've since yesterday, right through to even a few moments ago, I've been thinking about things, maybe, and I realized that we know, and we spoke last a few days ago about the balance, and we spoke about karma again, keeping the balance, and that life is just, it goes through cycles, and but one thing I realized in my thinking now is that those cycles can be and have been recurring cycles. Okay, so the same sort of thing, just in a different environment or something, happens again. Okay, let's say you get fired. Okay. And then, sometime in the future again, you get fired again, and then you get fired again, or you go back, your business goes bankrupt, and then in a few years' time, you go bankrupt again. And there seem to be sometimes recurring. And my thoughts in the last 24 hours have been, but how do you stop that cycle? And can you stop that cycle for reoccurring? And keeping in mind our conversation of a few days ago of keeping things in balance in order to evolve and move forward. Okay, but I don't know. Have you got any thoughts on that?
It is a fascinating question. I mean, the issue of trying to keep balance is in the sense of what's before you at any point in time. So
yeah,
it's not a case of if I do activities A, B, C, and D, that my life will be in balance. That's not about that at all, because it's something that you respond to rather than,
Yeah.
drives.
Yeah.
So the issue of balance is something that you do based on what's in front of you. In terms of the issue of what's in front of you,
or cycles.
Yeah. And part of that too is also, you read any philosophical or spiritual book that you like, is they talk about the issue in some sense about, like someone's having a big struggle with career or a marriage or whatever, and that there's going to be a big change in their life. Sometimes that change happens to people. Other times, people within their sphere of control point the direction of the change.
Yeah, or initiate the change.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges historically is perhaps, whether it's through stubbornness or ignorance or lack of awareness or whatever it is that, and it's probably lack of awareness, because you're not in tune with the cycle, if we use that language, then the change happens to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, like, to give an analogy, like from a health perspective, if you're eating poorly and not sleeping properly and partying every night and, doing all sorts of activities which are obviously not in your best interests, at some point in time, the universe or God or whatever says enough.
Yeah,
and
the
stop.
pendulum has swung to one extreme. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But I would then go on to say that as our awareness increases and we become more in tune with the cycles, even the cycle, like the seasons, then you do things in a more conscious way.
Yeah.
Or mindful way. You have to be careful as words. I know you have, so.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, part of my thinking is, and you use, it's easy to, perhaps the easiest analogy is about food and diet and stuff like that, okay? When you're looking at sort of things that are more abstract in one's life, as far as cycles are concerned, like employment and jobs and things like that, and things that happen maybe to a marriage or something like that. My thinking has been that it's like we get into a habit, okay, and it's easy to use food as an analogy in a diet, because then you can actually, it's obvious. But when you look at what sort of habits are you getting into that attracts these cycles that are repetitive, okay? And so to me, there must be something that is just inherently me that
well, I think it's just conditioned thinking and action that follows from that. If you look at the career thing, for example, and we're all guilty of it, is that, when you go through a change, either, I'm sick of working here, I want something different, or I've just been fired, your thinking tends to be, okay, so what do I look for next? And the next invariably is very similar to what you've been doing.
Yes, because you did that before this one started. Okay. I agree. So, but how does one get out of that? Okay, I've got a thought. As I say, part of the thinking, and because before I tell you the thought, what I've been thinking, is understanding or asking oneself the question. If I've my life is like repeating itself because of habits, okay? And those habits are generated by my thoughts, okay, my thinking. You just mentioned that. Where does that thinking originate from? Okay. Because it must originate from somewhere, that because you're going to think the same stuff. Okay, you're in a habit when, as you say, you get fired, you think in a certain way. Well, now I must look for another job, okay, for argument's sake. So there's a pattern in that, and that pattern's going to reoccur or make that cycle end the same way. Okay.
Without a doubt.
Yes. Yeah, but for me there is doubt, but I somehow firmly believe that is true. Okay. So where is that habit being stored? Okay. Is it in like the Akashic records? Is it in the subconscious mind? Okay.
Well, I even think it's in the conscious mind, quite frankly.
No, but I think the subconscious feeds the conscious. Okay, but it could be maybe it could be sitting in the conscious mind, and so immediately it rolls the same video over and over and over again in the conscious mind.
I think part of it's driven by the internal dialogue too. It's like, okay, I've just lost my job. What am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And the what am I going to do now is typically driven by what I've done in the past.
Yeah. From memory. It's your memory.
That's right. Yeah. But if the question that you pose to yourself is a different question, that is, what do I want to do now? Not how, but what do I want to do now? You know, what, you know.
Is your memory not going to just come back and fill that question?
Oh, absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. But that's the issue, though, is, am I in control of my thoughts or am I not?
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me, that thinking, because I landed up with the same thoughts in the last 24 hours. And then probably quite early this morning, I had that sort of I guess for myself, it was like an aha moment. But Moya Chalubi, or Logos, he says, don't meditate. Okay. He's not. He says, contemplate. Okay. And I've been dwelling with that today. In fact, I even went and wrote something this morning just to try and get my thinking clear. And it turned out to be a hell of a long article. But it was about, why contemplation is the answer. It's the answer to all the things we've been saying now. You see, if our memory is stored, doesn't matter where it's stored, okay, but it's recurring, okay. You've got a memory, you can't remember something in the future, okay. So, and you're thinking, you can't, you're only going to think something that's in the memory, okay. But if you contemplate something, okay, if you sit down and you now contemplate anything, okay, and I mean anything. Like you saying, you posed a question a moment ago, okay, what do I want to do, okay, but in order to contemplate something that you want to do, you must know what you want to do, okay, or you've got to somehow turn off all sort of memory recall.
Well, I think it's a bit more precise than that. It's how you phrase the question. Okay. I think I've told you this before. Like, I recall going on a retreat, and part of it was going outside and communing with nature, and they talked about they did talk about, they didn't use the word contemplation, but it was in that direction, because there was a distinction being made about meditation is not sitting there trying to just do nothing, because your mind will swamp you and you'll be distracted and all that sort of stuff. But if you go there and put an intention around it, and in that particular retreat, I went outside and I saw this little yellow flower, like most people would call a weed, there in the ground in front of me, and I just said to it, so what is it that you've got to tell me? What can you tell me? What have you got to show me?
Okay.
And that's what I had in mind.
Okay. So you had no preconceived thoughts. It was something out of the domain of your logical thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have no memories or experience of that. So that's brilliant. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Okay. And then to carry on with your story, what actually came out of that experience?
Oh, well, I just had this incredible experience where it seemed as if, time and space just, to use the biblical analogy, like the curtain just parted from one end to the other, just like tore open. And it was showing me, the nature of existence, the nature of the whole cosmos, right there in front of me. But I wasn't separate from it. I was part of it, and it was just, I mean, it's sort of ineffable in terms of trying to describe it. It's, you sound like a blabbering idiot, but it was just one of those experiences that was, just shook me to my very being, and I sort of, and that came about by just sort of having that openness and that sort of curiosity and that question in mind. I'm ready. Just show me what you've got to show me.
What was your question?
Well, it was literally that. I looked at this. I put my complete attention on this little plant, this little flower, and I just said, "So, what have you got to tell me? What can you share with me?" And that was it.
You didn't go there, let's say, to the retreat with some sort of intent. You weren't.
No,
you weren't sort of lost in life or
no, not
for
really.
Direction or.
I mean, it was at that stage where, like I'd been following Sadhguru for quite a while, and the purpose of the retreat was to learn another methodology in terms of a practice, and that certainly happened. But the experience while you're in that retreat was, was just the nature of the retreat. There was periods where there was no talking to anyone, and there was periods outside alone, and there was periods of experiencing, bitter cold, and there was periods of.
But you achieved what you went there for.
Yeah.
You went to find an alternative, did you? Yeah, and you did. Okay, and that experience with the I don't know. I think it's a dandelion that you looked at it for.
Yeah, in effect, yeah.
And that helped the whole process forward.
And there was sort of a humbling component to that too, because most people would just look down and just say, "Oh, weed," where it was like, no, I mean, you're here, part of existence. What can you show me?
Yeah.
And it showed me the whole cosmos.
Right.
Because there is no separation, So.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting.
But I think the learning out of that for me, and it's something that I have applied in many respects, and in other respects haven't, but in many respects I have, is I think carefully about the question that I'm going to ask, or the focus of the contemplation,
Yeah.
Because if I go there and sort of, put the question to the universe, if you want to use that sort of language, and if the question is, where's my next job coming from? There's so many assumptions under that.
Sure.
That it's going to be more of the same, status, pay, blah, 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 which is all nonsense,
Because your memory comes to play and your logical mind comes into play. and you using your mental capacities. Okay.
Yeah. So you have to know what question to ask.
Yeah.
And when I say know what question to ask, you have to know how to frame the question.
Yeah. Maybe you got to contemplate on the question.
Well, I think that's part of it. But when you ask, and we've sort of had these discussions, like within the context of that, say, business planning stuff and that, is you need to ask the why of yourself. You know, like, what am I going to do next? Well, why are you asking that question? And unless you can start to answer, as you well know, because you invented it, unless you can start to answer those why questions, then you can't actually phrase the question. All you're doing is just say, you know, it's my shout. Buy another round. Here we go again.
Here we go again. Yes. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Okay, you phrase it in a really interesting way. You've got a technique of doing that.
But I think part of it too is it also comes back to like any sort of creative process, because that's exactly what it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
it's creation unfolding. But with any creative process, you know, it's never. I should never say never, but it's very rarely is it A plus B equals C. You know, it's a lot of creative process, as you know, like it's stuff that just comes out of left field, or you're looking at something over here and then you make a leap back over here, and before you know it, you're back over there, sort of thing. You know, it's almost quantum field stuff in terms of, you know, the movement.
Quantum field, absolutely. It's all about the quantum field. Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah, you're so right. And where we as humans, to generalize, we try and create that we want the quantum to bring us. Okay, so we create an intent on becoming rich, or buying a house, or a motor car, or an intent to find a job.
Yeah, because we don't.
Yeah.
We haven't been very good at asking the right questions.
Yeah.
So instead of, you know, where is my next job coming from, the question perhaps should be, what do you want me to do next?
Yeah. But then you're aware that there is a God, there is a quantum intelligence, and there, that could be how one, in order to generate that creativity, okay, because only by creating that will you'll break the cycle. Okay.
And I think part of the conditioning of consumerism and traditional career planning and all that is that, you know, they talk about the career ladder. Well, the assumption is that it's a one-way direction, you know. Well, reality is it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
You know, not like that at all. And I think, you know, it comes back to that awareness thing, doesn't it? You know, as to how aware I am of, you know, where do I need to be? What do I need to be focusing on? You know, what's important? And the what's important shouldn't necessarily be followed by to me. What's important? What do I need to be doing next? You know. So,
yeah. But the power of the mind is overpowering. Okay.
Absolutely is. Yeah, absolutely is. You know, it really is. And I think part of the underlying assumption thing too is that, you know, we need to be mindful enough to acknowledge that whilst we're living in this life, it's not our life. You know, so it's a divine creation, and there's a divine plan, and you know that has a big bearing, I think, on what do you need me to do next. Whether I like it or not, it's neither here nor there, quite frankly.
But how close is that to fatalism? Okay.
Oh, I don't think it's fatal at all. No, because fatalism is just like, oh, I just float along like a piece of fluff in the wind. It's not like that at
Yeah,
all.
because it's God's going to do what He's going to do. Okay,
Yeah.
so definitely it can't. So when you talk in the way that you're talking, you got to. I would imagine you got to be very careful that you don't become fatalistic.
No, not at all. No.
Okay.
Because being fatalistic is not asking a question at all. It's just like, oh, well, what will be,
Will be.
and God's got a plan for me, and which is really code for I've got no clue what to do.
Yeah, 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 um, yeah. One's got to become very careful because you don't want to get caught up in the subtlety of what could possibly be to yourself fatalism. Okay.
I mean, it's quite a precise process. Absolutely,
Yes.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
as Moya rightly points out, it's something that you need to put a lot of focus and energy into
yeah.
to deeply contemplate. I mean, deeply contemplate.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the action. I think that's very clear to me in the last 24 hours is the contemplation. Okay. Ask the question and then decide what to contemplate on.
I mean, I said to someone the other day, they were talking about, God's going to show me the way. I said, like, God doesn't work in a drive-through hamburger joint. Doesn't sit there taking orders from people, like.
Yeah, very good point though. Very good analogy. Yeah. Yeah, because that's what we do, and religions have taught us to pray to God. Okay, and originally I had no doubt in my mind that it had nothing to do with asking God for anything. Okay, but that's what it's turned out to be. Please heal so and so, God, or please heal my leg, God.
Or give me the winning numbers for lotto. Like, I mean, that's.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing, the same concept.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't go any higher than the ceiling. So.
Yeah. So anything that you're asking for, to me, can be very subtle, and I don't know how. I don't know how the church has got around to that. I suppose none of the real God men of this planet over the last few thousands of years have actually ever started a church. Okay.
No, that's right. I mean, a lot of the religions were about fearing God, wasn't it? Really, it was all fear-based.
Yeah, but when a church was created, but I mean, if you take Jesus or Muhammad or
any of
any of them, okay, Krishna, there was never any sort of formal church and then rules and regulations, and this is how you do it, okay, and I mean, God, the Christian church only came about hundreds of years after Christ died. So, yeah. So,
but it's a really, really important issue as you've been thinking about, is what does it actually mean to be mindful?
Yeah.
What does it mean to contemplate? And that's probably a better word than mindful. What is that contemplation about?
Yeah. Yes. What is that contemplation about? Because if you, like I do, absolutely trust every word that comes out of Logos's mouth, is what is it that you contemplate on? Because how else are you going to break the cycle? Okay, except through the things that we've been discussing now. Okay, yeah, because we don't want it to recur. We don't want to be that rat on a wheel. Okay,
no.
We want to get off that that entombment, that cage that we're trapped in.
Well, it's almost like a karmic cycle, isn't it?
It is a karmic cycle. It actually is, sure. Okay. We spoke about other karmas through our actions and reactions the last meeting, but now we're talking about how do we break the cycle, okay, the karmic cycle. Okay, yeah. Through contemplation, that's the answer. Yeah, and being aware of what you're contemplating, and make sure that it's not egotistical. Make sure it's not for self-gain.
Yeah.
You
know, and being open to listening. And I mean, these are sort of clumsy sort of words because people have a lot of literal interpretation around it. But being open to the listening. So what's emerging from that silence? What's emerging from that stillness? And being aware and open enough to actually see it, and as it does emerge, not to just dismiss it.
Yeah, and to recognize it. Okay. Because your logical mind might well say, well, that's pathetic. Okay. I mean, you could never do that, or, that's, you don't have the skills or whatever. Okay. The logical mind is the satanic aspect that's going to try and keep that cycle going.
Like that book I listened to that was written by that Forrest monk, like at those periods in his life when those big decisions come up, people sort of said, oh, well, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, because you have to work to earn an income to buy food and pay the rent and all that sort of stuff. And it's that sort of, what I'd call like surface thinking that masks, and I'm not proposing that we all need to go and live in the forest and beg for our food and all that sort of stuff, but for some people that is what is called of them, For others, I mean, we all walk our own path.
Yeah. But look at that example as an analogy in one's life, okay?
Because I mean, that was sort of like an extension of what you were just saying. Is like, oh, that's ridiculous. I can't do that.
Yeah.
How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to do that? How am I?
Yeah.
It's not about how.
Yeah. Oh dear, have you frozen again? 32 minutes. Clearly, I'm not sure if I'm still recording, but Don, you have frozen yet again. We had that last meeting. Okay, I'm going to close off now and see if we can pick up